Welcome back to our fiction editing series where we're talking to you about all the different elements that make your fiction story strong. Today we want to talk to you about characters and the character story elements and how many of those you should have per scene and how to keep your readers coming back. Today with me I have Christina Stanley from Fictionary. Welcome.
Hi, Joellen. So this is where things get really interesting because we're going to get right into the nitty-gritty of story editing. Whether you're a writer or you're an editor, these are the things you need to know about story editing.
Exactly. And what we love about this series is that it's for both writers and editors, which allows them to learn a little bit and to improve their writing and their editing skills as we go. As we dig into the characters per scene, we want to make sure that they keep our readers coming back. So as we look into this, what exactly are we looking for, Christina?
So first, let's start with what I mean by characters in a scene. So characters in a scene are the characters who have a role in the scene. And so if you think of a play, it's who's on stage.
Right.
The second set of characters are the off-stage characters who are mentioned. So as a writer or an editor, you need to know exactly who's in and who's mentioned. And there's several reasons for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
One, the fewer characters you have, the more time a reader has to get connected with that character. And it's really important because your readers really want to cheer for somebody or cheer against somebody, depending on the story. So the number of characters is going to influence that. Too many and the reader's going to get lost. And of course, you know, there's exceptions. If it's a basketball team and it's the players playing, well, that's of course fine. But you want to think of this in the context of readers connecting and who are they connecting with in each particular scene.
Right. So how do we give them a sample of how they can evaluate the successful use of a character within the scene?
Okay, so the first thing is once you know your list, you're going to assess whether it's their first scene. So if it's a first scene, this first time the character's in the story, then character introduction needs to be considered and how is that character being introduced. And the more major a character is, the more of an introduction you probably want. The minor characters, not as much. So once your reader is engaged with the character, you not only need to know when they come in the story, you need to know when they exit the story. And that becomes important. So if you have a protagonist and they enter the story early, which they should, you don't want them exiting early. The protagonist must be in the climax scene. And they must also be in the key scenes, so in your inciting incidents and plot points. And so when you're reviewing a story, really you want to be looking at who is the protagonist and are they in the key scenes? Are they in the majority of scenes? When do they come in? When do they go out? So then overall, you have a nice view of what your characters are doing scene by scene, but also throughout the story.
Perfect. Now, what about our extra characters there we have? How do we know if they're actually serving a purpose or if we need to maybe remove them? And I know we fall in love with our characters, but how do we assess that?
Okay, so I'm going to give an example to explain this. In a book that I recently edited, the protagonist has two brothers with families. And in it, they're really a support role in helping the protagonist. So why do there need to be two brothers? Is one brother doing something different than the other brother? And in this case, the answer was no. She just had a nice family. So you cut one of the families all together and you take all of those scenes that were with the second brother and you make it the first brother. And now all of a sudden what happens is the reader doesn't get confused between which brother it is, first of all, and they can get closer and more connected to one brother and that family. And it makes it easier for the reader to remember. And it makes them happier because now they're more engaged with the character. So that's a very easy example of how to know.
Perfect.
Does the character actually have to be there?
Perfect. I think that's great. So again, we want to go in today. We want to look at our characters, make sure that the protagonist is in the primary scenes, any conflict, and they're in the point of resolution. And then we want to evaluate all of our extemporaneous people and see how much they are contributing to the story overall, if we can compound them or if we need to eliminate them.
One more thing about characters in a scene. This is your chance. You list them out. This is the chance to look, are any of the character names confusing? Yes. So that if you have a character Jack and a character John, the reader's not going to remember the difference. In one scene, they might, because they're in the scene together. But say 3 or 4 scenes goes by and now John appears.
Right.
The reader is going to think, well, is that Jack or John, and they won't know. And it drives a reader crazy when they have to flip back and go, who is this character that this just happened to? So when you're looking at who's in a scene, look at the names carefully.
And make them different. I mean, I would think multiple syllables versus single syllable, that's advantageous. Absolutely.
Yes, and starting with different letters. So don't use J and J, pick something else if you can, unless there's a very specific reason.
Right.
That, you know, and a reason might be a parent had twin sons, they named them Jack and John, and it's been an irritant through their entire lives. And so there's a reason for it, but if there's not a reason, don't do it.
Agreed. Agreed. I think that's great. I think our listeners have some definite takeaways. So go in, assess your characters in each of the scenes and see how they're working. And best of luck. When you need some additional help, reach out to us. My name's Jo. I'm with First Editing, and Christina here is with Fictionary. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.